Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! You see, today I have my Texas mug. I'm drinking my coffee out of the Texas mug, which I proudly swiped from a Yankee who did not deserve it. He had no business with this coffee cup, so I borrowed it and never gave it back. Oh, Sage is a thief. I don't know. You know, Texans tend to have their own set of rules, their own set of morals and honor and conduct. And they don't pay much attention to the common thought. They have their own way of doing things. Now, I'm not a Texan by blood, but a Texan by adoption. I spent most of my life in the great state of Texas, around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, owned multiple properties there, and spent my life and career as a musician based out of the Dallas area. I was a minister, a pastor in Texas, and I have honorary Texas status. I'm married a Texan, and all my kids were born in Texas. So I understand the mentality of a Texan because I transformed myself into one, or you might say Texas made me a man, since I was still a boy when I moved there, and my raising was finished off by Texas and by Texans. And so I want to talk about the topic of the day: Civil War in Texas. Don't. Once again, Coffee Talk is for things I find interesting but don't necessarily believe. This is a free space of conjecture where we just say, what if? So everyone's talking about what's going on down in Texas. Unless you've been under a rock, you know what's been going on. But in case you live under a rock, and some of us do, I will give you an update on what's going on there, followed by some conjecture about what might happen. As you know, this nation has been divided for the entire life of this channel, at least since 2016, 2017. We've been in a state of what some might refer to as a cold civil war, or a time of civil strife. From the summer of love to the January 6th debacle, we've seen the people from both sides rising up against what they perceive as injustice. And there is a division amongst people who want to change America into something else, and those of us who appreciate America as it used to be and would like to, quote unquote, make America great again. And so down in Texas, we've always had an issue with illegal immigration. Now, once upon a time, the Border Patrol agents in Texas were the most tyrannical and heavy-handed of all law enforcement. In the early days of the Border Patrol, those men simply shot people who tried to cross the border illegally. Now, we don't do that anymore. However, the public opinion on this, especially coming from the Democratic left side of the spectrum, and mostly people living in big cities far away from Texas who don't have to deal with the ramifications of illegal immigration, have fought for an open border policy. There is a strong conspiracy theory with a lot of legs that the leftists see these immigrants as potential voters and a new voting bloc. And 9 million of them we know of have crossed the border in the past 3 years. For the most part, the Border Patrol has gone from preventing people from crossing the border illegally to processing people who cross the border illegally. And so they become the welcome wagon of illegal immigration. In the city in question, there's a park. This city park on the border was taken over by the Border Patrol. And instead of preventing people from crossing in this area, which is easy to cross, the current is not swift there, the water is not deep, there is a nice beach on both sides of the border, and it's an easy crossing. So they've been crossing over into Eagle Pass, Texas, into Eagle Pass City Park for a very long time. And instead of trying to stop them or put up a barrier or even tell them to turn around and go back, they've set that up, the Border Patrol has in recent months, recent years, as a welcoming station for illegal immigrants. And it's being it's being reported that when people come in there, they get processed. Their name gets added to a list. They get a court date for a hearing to decide whether they are eligible for to be basically a refugee or an asylum seeker. And that court date is often 2 years into the future because they're so backed up. And whether it's the government giving them these things or whether it's private corporations, private entities doing it, but many of them are given a sum of money, a cell phone, and an airline ticket to any place in America where they would like to go to, and a bus ride to the airport. Now, Texas started a couple of years back interceding and intercepting these people and putting them on buses and taking them to these blue cities that they call sanctuary cities, places that have said, hey, we're welcoming you here. Come here, undocumented immigrants. We need you in our communities. And so Governor DeSantis down in Florida and Governor Abbott of Texas have been putting these folks on buses and sending them up there and dropping them off on the street corner, oftentimes right in front of Kamala Harris's vice presidential mansion. Don't. So we're having a standoff down there because a couple years back, Governor Abbott decided that he was done with this meet and greet method of Border Patrol, and they started employing Texas state troopers and most recently Texas State Guard and Texas National Guard troops who answer to the governor, not the federal government. Now, if the federal government wants to gain control of a state National Guard, like the Texas National Guard, then the process is you ask for assistance from the governor, and the governor grants you assistance. In certain cases in the past, the federal government has been allowed, I believe through the court system, to federalize state guards, taking control of them and putting them under the control of the United States Army. And so the Texas National Guard and the Texas State Guard, which is another entity that has no connection whatsoever to the U.S. Army, but is considered the governor's militia in the state of Texas, and they do have an Air Force and a Navy. And so these groups, under the direction of Governor Abbott, have been installing barriers, continuing the Trump-era build the wall mantra. And they've been building them out of shipping containers, concertina wire, chunks of fencing, and of course the long vertical metallic fencing that's up to 30 feet tall that President Trump had built so much of. As soon as Biden got control of the government, he started undoing everything that Trump did. And he set up these welcoming stations to equip the new immigrants to their life in the United States. Instead of stopping the inflow, they've been facilitating it. Like I said, a giant welcome wagon for immigrants, instead of stopping them at the border and telling them to go back to where they came from or apply for asylum through regular means rather than trying to sneak across the border. So 9 million of these people have entered the United States that we know of, and an estimated another 3 to 4 million have skipped past Border Patrol without registering and getting their court date and just entered the country. Now, these aren't Mexicans. These are Central and South Americans. These are Asians who travel to these other countries for the purpose of entering our country, and even Middle Eastern people with a history of terrorism in their background. One of the most recent videos circulated is a known Islamic Brotherhood terrorist from Azerbaijan who was found crossing the border, and he said, and I quote, "You're not smart enough to know who I am, but soon everyone will know who I am." Don't. Can you say foreign terrorism? So there's your background. The federal government is welcoming these people in. The state of Texas is putting up barriers, and the Supreme Court recently said that the Border Patrol agents have the sole authority over the border, and therefore have the right to remove any of these privately or state-funded barricades that have been erected, mostly, if not completely, on private property or city or state property. And now, basically, the state of Texas under Abbott has thumbed their nose at this and said, we're going to keep putting up the concertina wire. We're not going to give our private land access to the Federal Border Patrol so they can tear these things down, and we're going to defend ourselves. And to people who are not in the know, this looks like a blatant disregard for federal law. But in reality, in a recent letter, Abbott has invoked the right to self-defense, claiming that these people coming in from the southern border in such numbers represent an invasion. And therefore, we have the right as Texans to defend ourselves under the Constitution. And we have explicit right in the Constitution to defend ourselves if the federal government refuses or is unable to defend our border. After 8 attempts to get federal help in stopping the flow of immigration, only to get the cold shoulder from the Biden administration, Abbott has declared this now a invasion and essentially put us on a war footing in the state of Texas. And 25 of the 49 other governors of states of the United States have sided with Abbott and offered their support, including sending their state guard and national guard in their state to assist Texas in whatever way they need assistance. So could this turn into a shooting war? We've been talking about the possibility of civil war on this channel for 7 straight years now. Have been shocked. I've been shocked that it hasn't already happened. That the shooting war and the dividing of states and the secession of states and the sacking of the government on the federal level and the end of federal elections and taxes and all that hasn't happened already. Because it's clear that a communist element has taken control of the left portion of our government. And they have a brainwashed army of very liberal-minded people who believe that people like you and I are public enemy number one, that we should be disarmed, we should be put in concentration camps, and they want for us to not have a voice in the election. Whether you believe that Biden stole the election or not, I think it's very clear that illegal aliens have been given a green light to vote in places like California and have been offered the opportunity to vote and are voting in record numbers for people like Biden, who opened the door for them and allow them into our country unabated. So if this could go south, how would it go south? Well, let's start with the 25 governors. When you look at a map of the states that these Republican governors represent, you have a line of states that are connected that range from Idaho and Montana in the northwest all the way down to Florida in the southeast. This includes the state of Oklahoma that I live in, which is linked at the hip to the state of Texas, and anything that happens to Texas will also happen to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma and Texas have each other's backs. Some might say we're just the more rednecky northern neighbor. We're not just neighbors, we're brothers to the Texans. And there are many Texans here in Oklahoma and many Okies down in Texas. So that Red River is not a huge barrier, and there's not much difference in the people. There is and there isn't. Not any meaningful political difference for sure. And so there's this unbroken line of states, 25 in all at this point. There are other states that may also join the modern, I hate to use the word of the previous Civil War, let's just call them the red states, that may join into this rebellion. Kentucky has not signed on. Their Kentucky governor has not signed on in their support for Texas. But most of the Deep South has. And then also the central northwestern states, not the border, not the Pacific states, but the states inland. Idaho, Montana, Nebraska, Wyoming. And they're connected by mainly the state of Missouri. So Kansas is a holdout state. They have apparently a Democrat governor, and they have not signed on in support. And there are a few states that are split amongst the people. And at the beginning of this channel, when I would talk about the Civil War, it was all about it starting in the Pacific Northwest, where the western portion, which is mainly city and urbanites, control the entire state, and the eastern half of Oregon and Washington, and even the northeastern portion of California, have red counties, and they are basically agricultural and ranchers and outdoorsmen, and they have an old school, I kind of call it Northwest Texas, because they're very much closer related to Texans than they are to the coffee, bean, soy boys of Portland and Seattle. So those states might potentially be split, with Oregon joining Idaho, and Eastern Oregon, and Eastern Washington rather, also joining Idaho. And this country could be split with the 25 states that we have, and several others that might split down the middle, Kansas being one of them, Colorado being another. We see Colorado as the hippie capital, pot-smoking capital of the world. However, the eastern half, once again, just like Oregon, Washington, the eastern half of Colorado is very much agricultural, ranch country, and the people there are very Texan-like, okay? And have more in common with Texans than they do with the granola eaters of the Denver Basin. So Colorado could potentially be split in a civil war and divided in half. Oregon and Washington might join Idaho, and their states be split in half. And Kansas might be the center of conflict. You know, in the first Civil War, rather, the state of Kansas was known as Bleeding Kansas, and Kansas was divided then. Kansas is also divided now. The eastern portion of Kansas is the Kansas City area that borders Missouri there. They're more urban-minded than the far western half, which is more like eastern Colorado. And so that narrow corridor of southern states and upper northwestern states are connected by the state of Missouri, which is absolutely as red as you can get. They are very much aligned and linked and in concert with Texas and Oklahoma, and Missouri is a constitutional carry state, as well as Oklahoma and Texas. And Missouri could be a choke point. If you wanted to divide in the event of a civil war, let's say these states start to secede from the Union, they declare their independence or they create some kind of confederacy, then wouldn't Missouri, the one linking state between these two areas, be a center of control? If you could take Missouri, you could cut the upper Northwest off from the Gulf states, and the Gulf states have to be in connection with those northern states if they want to make a country, and that's because of seaports. Those states, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, are all landlocked states, and they have no access to ports. So getting goods and services in and out of those states would have to come up through the Gulf states, through the Gulf of Mexico. And the choke point would be there at Missouri. So Missouri and Kansas could be the center focal point of any real civil war between these 25 states who are rebelling against the federal government, and rightfully so, and this corrupt government of northeastern and west coast cities. So you might see a flare-up or a confrontation occur, potentially in Missouri or on the Missouri-Kansas border or in Kansas or all of that area. Colorado would definitely be an area of conflict because the west portion is linked ideologically with the West Coast, and the eastern portion is linked ideologically to the Gulf states. And This movie that is supposed to come out, or I don't think it's come out yet, on a civil war in America, talks about the forces of California and how they're a part of it. Well, California, like Washington and Oregon and Colorado and Kansas, is very divided. That the whole eastern inland portion of California is not in lockstep with their western counterparts. So there could be a militia uprising in California. There could be a militia uprising in Washington and in Oregon, in eastern Colorado, and in western Kansas. We would kind of need that to happen if we want to establish a nation out of these scattered states. They have to be connected to the Gulf. They have to be connected to the ports in Houston, access to the Mississippi River in Louisiana, and the other Gulf port and Florida ports. That this is how they could survive as a nation. No landlocked nation can survive. You can just starve them out. They can't engage in international trade. So the new fledgling country that we might just call the Gulf states of America, if they were to join with the upper Midwest, Northwest inland states, they would have to be connected to the ports. They would have to be connected to the Gulf states. And that means the choke point really is from the Colorado Rockies to the Mississippi River. And that area in there would be an area of great conflict. You might see internal civil wars in the state of Kansas, internal civil wars in the state of Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and even California. And one of the reasons I believe that God sent me to the center of the United States is that this is also dead center of the, well inside the safety zone. We're protected from any conflict that might occur north in Kansas for the most part. That would be the weakest area. That would be an area that might bleed over into Oklahoma. Would be what would be going on in western Kansas and eastern Colorado. Nebraska to the north is a strong red state, to the north of both of those states. So that, in my opinion, is where the real conflict might start. The flashpoint is most definitely this park in Eagle Pass, Texas, where the Texas authorities are saying to the federal government, if you won't do your job, we will. And the big question is Joe Biden going to go all Abraham Lincoln on this? Is he going to respond with force? My guess is he will respond with lawfare, which is legal warfare. That this will be fought out in courts. But ultimately, the Texans are standing on a common law principle of self-defense that predates this country and even predates the nation or the state of Texas. Is that a state, a region, a people, a group, even individuals have the God-given right to self-defense. They have the God-given right to protect their property rights from invaders and people who would rape, rob, and pillage and take advantage of our freedoms. And so, in a bad way. And so, they're saying that they have the right to do this. And I don't believe they care what the Supreme Court says. I don't believe they intend to change no matter what threats come their way, that they are determined to secure their southern border. And if you send troops in or federal agents in, they will stand their ground. Texans will stand their ground. But what if Biden does the one thing he could do, which is federalize the Texas National Guard? Well, first of all, he would have to federalize all of the 25 states' National Guard, since National Guard troops from other states are converging now on this area of South Texas. And they intend to offer material support, if not combat support, in the event it might come to that. So this puts us closer to an actual real civil war, not just civil strife, not just unrest, not just a social war, not just political, but an actual war between armies. Because I'm fairly certain that even under threat of prosecution, even under threat of being declared an insurgent, that members of the Texas National Guard will not submit to Biden's federalization. If he is to do this, they will basically give Biden the collective middle finger. And none of them will, or very few of them, will go against the governor of Texas in favor of orders coming from the U.S. Army. So at this point, does Biden declare an insurrection? Does Biden declare these states to be in rebellion? Does he send Army troops, U.S. Army troops, in violation of posse comitatus to make war against the Texas National Guard and the National Guard of these other states? Would he have these people arrested? There's some people in the conspiracy theory world that's saying that this is a trap being laid by Biden, that he will let this blow over, appear to capitulate, and then send U.S. Marshals after Greg Abbott, after the governors of these other 25 states, after members of the leadership of the National Guard that refuse orders coming from the U.S. Army. That rather than engaging in open warfare, that he would use the rule of law, the illusion of power, to privately kick in the doors of these people at their homes and arrest them. And this is very much what they did on January 6th. They didn't send in the troops and arrest all those people. They used technology to discover their identities, then went to their home in small groups and kicked their door in the middle of the night and put them in cuffs. So how might this go? I don't think it's going to blow up into an army versus army down on the border. I think that this will start a Stasi kind of secret police rounding up of anyone who sides with these 25 governors, anybody who is on YouTube saying that they are in support. And then there's this idea that 700,000 trucks are going to start a convoy, and this convoy, this rally of truckers, is going to go down there. For what purpose other than to make a spectacle, I don't know. I don't know what help they would be. They would more than likely all be in the way. But would those people, like the truckers who fought against the lockdowns in Canada, would they then be targeted by the federal government, have their trucks seized, their bank accounts closed, their doors kicked in, and be arrested simply for driving down there? And I gotta say that I'm curious enough about all of this that there's a part of me that wants to be in the middle of it, right? That I kind of want to do what I did during the Virginia gun rally and militia muster that happened on January 20th, 2020, when y'all paid my way to go down there and do a 6-hour live stream at that event, the largest gathering of gun owners and militias in the history of the United States happened that day. No one ever talks about that day because it ended peacefully, because the police were very nice to us. They did not push anybody's buttons. We picked up our trash at the end of the day and left, and no scar was left behind. So a part of me wants to just jump in the puddle jumper and run down there. But if you've been following the channel, you know that there's a young family that I've grown very fond of, that I've been living in my other cabin free of rent and not charging them for utilities and taking care of them and driving them places. And they're about to drop a second baby. And so little Jazzy is due. I had said in a previous video it was supposed to be here on Monday, but I was corrected. It's actually Wednesday. So I appreciate your prayers in that regard. They're taking this baby very early. It's only about 4.5 pounds. So, yeah, if I didn't have that obligation, I might ask you for financial support so I could jump in the car and make the 12-hour drive down to Eagle Pass and give you some on-the-street images of what's going on down there and some interviews. But I think that might have to wait till a later date. Plus, I think this thing is just getting started. I'm not going to fall into the trap of previous predictions where I said all this was going to happen in a flash. I think we're on a slow walk creep into civil war in the United States, into the division of the United States into the Gulf states versus the other states of the Union. That if the United States wants to stay a country, and these Gulf states and these central northwestern states, landlocked states, want to make a union, they will split this country physically down the middle. And I can't see how the United States would allow that to happen. That's why I think if there is going to be any real bloody fighting in an actual civil war, it will probably occur in Missouri, in Kansas, and in Colorado for the most part, because they can't allow a Gulf states coalition to split the continental United States down the middle. They need to keep that connection between the West Coast and the East Coast alive, and they would be willing to fight us to keep that open. So those are my predictions. Tell me what you think. Is this all going to blow over? I know most of you are going to say, we're going to elect Trump and he's going to fix it all. But I could do a whole coffee talk on whether they're going to let Trump be president again, whether the deep state will allow it. And I do think his life is constantly in danger. And they've definitely set out to destroy him in a virtual way, and they might actually try to destroy him in a physical way, or imprison him and make a Nelson Mandela kind of martyr out of him in prison. So tell me what you think in the comment section. Maybe Trump will fix everything. He definitely backed all of these 25 governors. He called upon all willing states to send troops to Texas to defend Texas. And many on the left are having a cow about that, calling him a dictator, claiming he's a second president. And so we're already seeing what could possibly spiral out of control. Whether it takes months or years is the question. I don't see unity in the United States ever being a thing again. But I could be wrong. Tell me what you think. Once again, this channel is supported by viewers like you. If you don't send your donations to my PayPal, my Cash App, and my post office box, this channel ceases to exist. And I'm barely staying ahead of the wolves at the door just on a week-by-week basis. So please continue to help support this channel. You're not paying for a big infrastructure. I'm just a guy that used to live in a van down by the river, and now I live in a cabin down by the creek. We'll see you next time on Coffee Talk!